What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for our post-spring SEC power rankings, and you might be surprised by some of these rankings, but I've gone through every team, really evaluated the rosters, and I feel pretty good about these rankings. They're probably going to change, though, before the season starts because there are still a ton of difference makers in the transfer portal. We've passed that window where we're not going to see any new players enter the transfer portal, but teams are going to be able to add players still throughout the summer. And again, there are some guys out there that could really make a difference and potentially change these rankings around. So we'll start at the bottom. Number 14 is Vanderbilt. Made some strides last year, had a much better season, but still I don't think that this team is ready to... I mean, maybe they win a couple of games in the SEC again, but I don't think they're ready to get out of that bottom spot in the rankings. AJ Swan back at quarterback. You've also got Ken Sills, who has played as well. So you got some experience there back at the quarterback position. Playmakers around them, though. You do have Will Shepard at wide receiver, really talented player. But other than that, just not a ton of playmakers at the running back or wide receiver position. Offensive line for them, it's not going to be great. I don't think they have... They're probably have the worst offensive line in the SEC, honestly, when you look at them there. And then you look at the defensive line, kind of the same story. Christian James, he's a pretty solid player there on the defensive line. The linebackers, average. Defensive backs, average. There's just not a whole lot to get excited about if you look at this Vanderbilt team. They do have DeRicky Wright and CJ Taylor, a couple of guys in the secondary that are really good players. So that may be a strength for their defense. But overall, this Vanderbilt team... just not quite ready, in my opinion, to make a big jump in the SEC. But like I said, they could win a game or two. That wouldn't surprise me. They're not that far behind everyone else. Number 13 is Auburn, and this is a team that could potentially move up in the rankings if they get a quarterback in the transfer portal. And I think they might get Casey Thompson. We'll see how that plays out. I actually think Casey Thompson would be a big time difference maker for them. I like what I've seen from him in the past. I know he's kind of had his ups and downs, but I think it would be a big upgrade for them. But if not, right now we're looking at Robbie Ashford at quarterback. Really limits them in the passing game. The running game should be really good. You've got Jarquez Hunter coming back. He's going to be, I think, one of the top running backs in the SEC this year. Brian Batty from South Florida, a speedster. They've got some other guys in there as well. So running back position looks solid. Wide receivers, who's going to step up there? That'll be a question mark. Offensive line, some transfers coming over, I think will actually improve this offensive line. I think they're going to be better there. Defensive line, really the front seven maybe takes a bit of a step back from where they were last year, but this is going to be a really, really good secondary. It really starts with DJ James. You got some other guys, Nehemiah Pritchett, a couple of cornerbacks who they're going to be probably one of the top 1-2 punches at cornerback in all of the SEC. Keontae Scott, Donovan Kaufman at safety, a couple of veteran guys back there as well. So this is going to be a really good secondary. What is holding them back, though, is the passing game. I mean, they're going to be really one-dimensional, and because of that, and because I don't think they're going to have a defense that's dominant in the front seven, I think this team is going to struggle to win games, improve from last year for sure, but still, they need to develop a passing game if they're going to make a jump in the SEC. Florida's kind of in the same category. I'll tell you right now, if Auburn gets a guy like Casey Thompson, I'd probably flip Auburn and Florida. But Florida's a very similar team. You look at what they have coming back and everything. Graham Mertz at quarterback, not really a guy that I think is going to make a big difference for them. But they've got a really good running game with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. So just like Auburn there. Wide receivers, they did just lose Xavier Henderson, who was going to be their best wide receiver, or one of the top two for sure, coming back this year. That's a big loss. He went in the transfer portal. Ricky Pearsall is back, so that's good news for them. Offensive line should be decent, probably similar to Auburn's, I would say. You look at the defensive side of the ball. There are some playmakers on defense. They've got some guys. You look at Jason Marshall at cornerback. He's going to be really good for them, I think. Taraja Mitchell, a transfer from Ohio State at linebacker. We'll see what he can do. Defensive line looks pretty strong. So this is a team that defensively will be solid. They won't be great, but they won't be bad. Kind of middle of the pack, I would say, defensively. But can they develop a passing game? Just like Auburn. It's the exact same story here. Auburn and Florida. If one of those teams or both of those teams, whatever, if they can get that passing game develop that, then these teams have a chance to be maybe in the top half of the SEC. So the potential is there, but looking at them right now, I've got them down towards the bottom. Number 11 is Arkansas. I think a lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but I do see some problems here for Arkansas. KJ Jefferson is back, and I think people jump on that and say, wow, this team's going to be good. Lost some close games last year. They got A.J. Green, Rocket Sanders at running back, a couple of guys there, nice 1-2 punch, and they've got some other. I mean, this running back room is loaded. But where I'm concerned is the wide receiver position. I mean, who are they going to throw the ball to? They added some transfers, but these are guys that played at lower levels, and I don't know if that's going to translate into the SEC or not. So that's a big question for me. Offensive line, they've got some key pieces back, but they also have a couple of holes there as well. But I think this is a team just like Florida and Auburn that will be able to run the football, and we'll see about the passing game. Defensively, the big question last year was the secondary. I think the secondary is going to be improved this year. They've added some transfers there to help boost that secondary. Depth might be an issue, but their starters should be pretty solid. But losing your starters at linebacker, that's big. That's a big loss for Arkansas. When you play the 4-2-5, you need those two linebackers. They lose both of their starters from last year. Defensive line looks kind of average. So I think there are some question marks. The linebacker position, passing game, those things concern me about Arkansas, and that's why I've got them down here at number 11. Let's go to number 10 now. That is Missouri. Missouri is a team that I think could surprise some people this year. I think Brady Cook's really underrated at quarterback, and they've also got Jake Garcia coming over from Miami who could potentially challenge him for that starting job. So you've got a couple of options there. Running game will be okay. They do have some good receivers. Luther Burden is a guy that has a chance to be all SEC this year. Mookie Cooper pretty solid as well. Looking at the offensive line, pretty strong offensive line. I think they will be pretty good there up front. So passing game should be good. Pass protection should be solid for them. And then you look at the defense for Missouri. Front seven is decent. It's pretty good. They do have Tyrone Hopper back at linebacker. He's going to be one of the top linebackers in the SEC this year. And Chad Bailey as well. So unlike Arkansas, they've actually got a couple of guys at linebacker that should be really good for them. Secondary looks really strong. You look at especially their really it's all of the secondary corner safeties. They are loaded up there. So this is going to be a good Missouri defense. A passing game that is underrated. A running game that is solid. It's not great, but it should be pretty solid. And I think Missouri is going to be a tough out this year. I think this will be a team that definitely surprises some people. But I've only got them at number 10 because there are a lot of good teams in the SEC. Moving on to number 9, that is South Carolina. The Gamecocks, of course, have Spencer Rattler coming back. That's the first thing everyone jumps to. But you got Wells back at wide receiver. He has a chance to be one of the top receivers in the SEC. Running game is going to be interesting. Losing some guys there. We'll see if they can run the football. Offensive line is also a concern for me. This is an offensive line that may be one of the worst, honestly, in the SEC this year. So that is definitely an issue. You look at their defensive line, they're pretty strong there. Linebackers are decent. Secondary is decent, but it's not a defense that I think is going to be great. So they're going to have to score points. Offensive line, though, will be the key. If South Carolina's offensive line can overperform, then the Gamecocks have a chance to be really good this year. But if they struggle up front, they're going to struggle to win football games. And that's just something that I'm very concerned with, and that's why I've got them at number 9. Moving on to number 8, I've got Kentucky. Kentucky could be a sneaky good team this year. You've got Liam Cohen back running this offense. You bring in Devin Leary, a very talented quarterback, and he's got weapons to throw to. This is probably the best group of wide receivers that Kentucky has had in a long time. You've got Dane Key, Tavion Robinson, and Barry Brown, who's probably the best of them all. That is a really good trio of running backs there, of wide receivers, I should say. And they bring in Ray Davis from Vanderbilt at running back, transfer there. McClain also back. So this is actually, I would say this is one of the more talented Kentucky offenses that they've had in a long time. And I think they're going to be able to throw the football. They're going to be much more balanced than we've seen in the past. I know they've gotten better the last couple of years, but I think they're going to be even more improved this year. The offensive line looks solid. You look at the defense. Defensive line is an area where they could get better. They do have Deion Walker right there in the middle. He's a good one, but other than that, not a ton of depth on that defensive line. Linebackers look average. Secondary looks average. So this is a Kentucky team that I think is going to be able to score points And I think they're going to probably have to win some shootouts, because I don't think this is, while I said that this is probably going to be one of the better offenses that they've had in a long time, defensively this might be one of the worst offenses, one of the worst defenses that Kentucky's had in a while. So it'll be a different look Kentucky team, in my opinion. Let's move on to number 7, Mississippi State, another team that could surprise some people this year. Of course, with the coaching change and all the tragedy with Mike Leach and everything, it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. But Will Rogers is back. They've also got Mike Wright from Vanderbilt, a guy that has played, a guy that can run. Look for him to maybe make an impact, maybe have some packages for him. We'll see how that goes. You've got Marks back at running back, very talented guy back there. They've got some weapons still back at wide receiver as well. This offense should be just fine. You look at the offensive line, they'll be solid on the offensive line. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. There are some guys there that could be difference makers for them. We'll see how that plays out. Defensive line, strong. Linebacker Nathaniel Watson has a chance to be one of the better linebackers in the SEC. And then in the secondary, pretty solid there as well. But I think it's the offense for me that is what intrigues me about this Mississippi State team. And I think has a chance to be good and be balanced. You get away from that air raid, run the football more, be more balanced. We'll see how that works. But I think they have the talent to be pretty good this year. Number 6 is Texas A&M. A team that has a lot of talent on the roster. How is it going to work with Bobby Petrino? This is just a big question mark. I think there's potential for them to be one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the SEC, but there's also potential for them to be one of the 4 or 5 worst teams in the SEC. So we'll see what happens, but it's definitely an intriguing team to watch. You've got Connor Wegman back at quarterback. Also Max Johnson, who's played some last year before getting injured. No one really exciting jumping out to me at running back, but they've got some talented wide receivers: Aniyah Smith, Moose Muhammad, Evan Stewart, who might be the best receiver in the SEC this year. They had a transfer, Tyron Smith, a speedster. He actually went back into the transfer portal, so they'll be missing him for sure. Offensive line looks pretty strong for them. Up front, defensive line, a lot of talent, a lot of young guys. Big-time recruits. If those guys can play out, this has a chance to be a really good defensive line. And then you look at the linebacker position. Chris Russell is back. Edgerrin Cooper as well. Nice 1-2 punch there at linebacker. And then a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism in the secondary. This should be a very good secondary. So I think Texas A&M's defense should be improved from where they were last year. Offense, we'll see. It's going to be a mystery, but there is definitely potential for Texas A&M to be a very good team this year. Moving on to number 5, Ole Miss, a team that did not finish the way you wanted to last year, but you look at what they did in the transfer portal. I'm really impressed with what Lane Kiffin has been able to do, filling those holes, getting the right players. They've got options at quarterback. Jackson Dart, who I think will wind up winning the job, the starter back from last year. But they've also got Spencer Sanders coming over from Oklahoma State, Walker Howard, maybe the most talented passer of the 3, transfer from LSU. Judkins is back at running back. Bentley is back there as well, a speedster. Nice 1-2 punch there at that running back spot. They got no superstar wide receiver, but a lot of really solid guys there. You look at Michael Trigg at tight end coming back from an injury. You got Prescorn at tight end, a really good player there. Offensive line should be decent for them, pretty solid. Maybe not the best, probably a mid-tier, I guess I would say, in the SEC. Defensive line, kind of the same story. They're decent. They're pretty solid there on the defensive line. Linebackers, kind of the same story. Should have a good secondary. I like what they've got there, especially what they added in the transfer portal. I think this team has a chance to be really improved in their pass defense. So Ole Miss is a team to watch out for. No real major holes, nothing that concerns me in a big way. Now, they don't have the talent maybe of the top 2 or 3 teams in the SEC, but they've got some playmakers, and they're going to have an offense, maybe an improved defense, could make them a dangerous team in 2023. Moving on to number 4, we got Tennessee coming off of a great year. Quarterback position, I think Joe Milton's going to be the guy for them, but of course they got the big-time freshman in there as well. You've got Jalen Wright and Jabari Small back at running back. Nice 1-2 punch there. Wide receivers should be strong. You got Brew McCoy, probably the best one coming back, but Dante Thornton, a transfer from Oregon, also back. Ramel Keaton, a veteran. Squirrel White, a speedster. Plenty of weapons there. They're going to be really good offensively with Josh Heupel calling the plays. No real concerns for them there. Offensive line, they do lose a couple of key pieces, but should be still solid on the offensive line. Defensively, yeah, I'm a little bit more concerned there. I think that's what could potentially hold them back from being a top 10 team this year. But if the defense can step up, then this team becomes really, really good, and a team that could potentially win the SEC. Aaron Beasley will be back at linebacker, big-time leader for them there. Secondary has some decent players back as well, but can they take that next step on that side of the ball? That's the big question, because like I said, Tennessee is going to be able to score points. I'm not really concerned about them on that side. So let's go to number 3 now, Alabama. Of course, just adding Tyler Bugner, transfer from Notre Dame. Probably going to win the starting job if I had to guess, just because of, he's had time with Tommy Rees before at Notre Dame. So he probably winds up winning that job. But he's not a guy that really scares me, not a guy that I think is going to be a Heisman candidate or anything. So that's still a question mark, what they're going to get out of the passing game. Receivers have let them down the last couple of years. They've got talent, they've got athleticism, but they just have not put it together with these young wide receivers. Can they do that? That'll be big. Running game will be fine. They'll be good. You've got weapons there. You got Jace McClellan probably going to be the starter, Roydell Williams as well. So I think they're going to be able to run the football, and they're going back to their old ways. They're going to run the football, try to play good defense. I think that's been clear by some of these coaching moves. And everyone's probably freaking out about the spring game. Look, these spring games don't mean anything. If you look into those spring games too much to try to predict a team the next year, that's going to backfire, trust me. I don't even watch the spring games anymore, because you go through and you do all this evaluation, going through all these rosters and everything, and then one spring game is going to change your mind and take away from all the research you've done. That just, it doesn't work that way, and it's happened to me in the past. So that's why I don't really watch them anymore. But you look at the offensive line, they're going to be strong up front. Maybe not an elite offensive line, but they should be pretty good on there. Defensively, going to be depending on a lot of young players, but they've got so much talent. I mean, this is a defense that really just is loaded with talent, athleticism. Kool-Aid McKinstry, probably their best player at corner. They've got a lot of guys there in the secondary. You look at, they lost some good players, but trust me, they've got plenty of guys to step up there, and I think this defense will be just fine. Moving on to number 2, we've got LSU. This is an LSU team that could be really dangerous this year. I have really only one concern about this team. I'll talk about the positives first. Of course, Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier back at quarterback. Can't go wrong really with either one of those guys. They've got several guys at running back returning that can produce for them. Malik Neighbors should lead the way at wide receiver, but they got plenty of options there as well. Starting unit up front on the offensive line looks really good. Depth might be a concern. If they have some injuries on the offensive line, that could cost them later in the season. Defensively, we got some playmakers there on the defensive line. I think they should be good there. Looking at the linebackers, Omar Spates, transfer linebacker, should be probably their best linebacker. Well, you've got Harold Perkins. However you want to look at him, he's really more of a pass rusher, but he is a linebacker. This kid, I think, has a chance to be one of the top 5 defensive players in the country. I mean, he's just really, really good. So watch out for him. Mekhi Wingo up front. I mean, there are several guys on the defensive line. This is going to be a really, really good front 7. But I am concerned about the secondary. That's where I'm concerned about LSU. You've got some guys there with some experience, but they're going to be depending on a lot of young players, and they're not going to have a lot of depth. So that is the one area that concerns me about LSU. But if they can take care of that, this team has a chance to win a national championship, because they are really good everywhere else. But another team that's really good everywhere else is Georgia, and there are really no question marks about the Bulldogs. I think they're going to be fine at quarterback with Carson Beck, or whoever winds up winning that job. I think it will be Beck. They've got a stable of running backs. They've got talent at wide receiver. They've got Brock Bowers, the best tight end in the country. They've got a loaded offensive line, probably the best offensive line in the SEC. Defensively, they have guys that didn't start last year but played, and they've really got experience all across the board, even though some of these guys maybe weren't starters. And we know about the talent they have on defense with all the recruiting they've done. Kirby Smart knows how to coach defense, so I'm not concerned about them there either. Really, no question marks for Georgia. This team is absolutely loaded, and they're ready to make another run in the SEC. I think Georgia, clearly looking at them right now, they're the most complete team, and they're the number 1 team in our SEC power rankings.